Today we're going to make an apple pie in the design of a lattice crust. To begin, we're going to start with our apples. I like to use Granny Smith apples because they stay nice and firm. They also add a nice tartness which offsets the sweetness of the sugars in our recipe. So we're going to start by peeling our apples. Being careful as you peel not to grab onto your fingertips or your knuckles is always an important thing. So we're going to peel these up, get them nice and clean, so that we can go ahead and begin to dice them for our recipe. Alright, so our next step is to take the apples and to cut them in half through the center. Then we're going to cut them again into quarters. And we're going to look for the core that's in the center. We're going to take our knife on an angle and we're going to cut the core out of our apple. So the core is very tough, it's very fibrous. It also usually contains the seeds. So you want to make sure that you clean that up from your apples. So continue to do this for all apples. And then clean your cutting board to get all of that, including the seeds, away. So now we'll take each quarter and now we'll cut it in half again, so into eighths. And then we're going to evenly slice our apples. So make sure you tuck your fingers and rock your knife back and forth. And then move your cut apples over to the side. And continue to carefully do this for all your apples until they are all nice and even size. Some people like to leave wedges. I like to cut them into smaller slices. It's really up to you. So we'll continue here nice and carefully, cutting our apples. And then when we're done, we're going to take our apples and put them into a bowl. And there they are. So now we're going to add a little bit of lemon juice to keep our apples from turning brown or from oxidizing. And we'll just squeeze the lemon juice onto the apples and then toss them evenly to coat. This is also going to add flavor to our pie dough, an acidic component. Our next step is to make our dry filling mix. So we're going to take our light brown sugar, our granulated sugar, our cinnamon, and we'll take a pinch of salt. Salt is always going to accent the sweetness in our recipes. So here we're going to add our flour and our butter. Our butter is going to actually melt while baking in the recipe and actually help us get a nice final sauce to the apple pie. So you can take that dry mixture and you're just going to toss it with the chopped apples. And we're just going to toss that all together, and as it sits just for a few moments, the sugars will start to break down and you'll start to see that that nice liquid filling start to happen while we make our pie crust. So here we are with our pie dough again. So we are going to take our pie dough, a little bit of flour, always on the cutting board or on your surface, just enough to keep it from sticking. And we're just going to start to roll this out. And if you notice, I roll and turn it just about a quarter of a turn. You can see it's breaking apart a little bit. That's okay. We can just kind of pinch that all back together. Use a little bit of flour as you need. And as you keep on turning it and rolling it on quarters, you'll see that it stays nice and round. So we have a round pie dish that we're working with. So it's important that our pie dough stays round so that we don't have any waste for the pie dough for the bottom crust. All right, so make sure it's nice and thin. And the way that you know that you've rolled it out enough is that you're going to actually take the pie plate that you're going to be putting it in. And if you just take that pie plate and sit it on top, you should have about an inch all the way around. And so that indicates that we have enough, we have rolled it out enough. So we're just going to fold it over and bring it over into the pie dish. That extra space of about an inch round accounts for the fact that when we push the dough in, it has to sink into the pie plate. So we're going to make sure that we press that in, press it all the way around. If we have any holes in the center, we can just grab a piece of dough from the side and just patch things up, and we'll set that aside. So our next thing is to fill it. You can see it's nice and shiny now. That's the sugars that started to dissolve a little bit. And so when those sugars cook even further, it'll thicken up with the flour, and the butter will help give it a nice finish. So we want to make sure that we have a nice mound of apples in the center. So what we're going to do is we are going to make a lattice crust. So in order to do this, we're going to take another pie dough round. Same process again, a little bit of flour to keep it from sticking. This was very cold, so I just used the rolling pin just to kind of break it up a little bit so that I could break it up and start to roll it and not get it too warm. And again, we're going to roll this nice and round again, turning every quarter, not overworking or overflouring our dough. So working with it cold and working with it quickly, keeping it moving on the cutting board will allow you to keep it at the right temperature and consistency that you need. So I'm going to take this dough and just make sure that it covers the entire pie. So now what we'll do is we'll take that dough back off the pie, so I know I have the right size. And I want to cut this dough into about maybe like 1/2 to 3/4 inch thick strips. So I'm just going to take a nice sharp knife, and starting in the center, I'm going to cut straight down. And then I'm going to continue, and you can use a ruler. I'm very good at using my eye when I do this, but nice straight cuts. And they should be about 1/2 inch to 3/4 of an inch thick. So we'll continue to cut that all up. And we're always going to save our scraps because we always have a use for those. So if you do have any pieces that break off, just put them to the side. Now starting with the longest piece in the center, you're going to carefully pick it up and drape it across the center of the pie. Okay. And one thing to mention, the reason why we mound our apples up in the center, if you notice they're kind of like a nice hill in the center, is because as they bake, they will shrink down. So we want to make sure that we build them up nice and high, and then it shrinks down to the right thinness. So we're going to go ahead and place these strips on our apple pie, leaving space in between. Okay. And now what we'll do is we'll take every other strip and we'll fold it back. So every other piece of pie dough, we'll fold it back. Now find your next longest piece to go across the center. Fold these pieces back over, keeping everything nice and straight. And now every other piece fold back. Lay the next strip down, fold those pieces back over, and continue that process. Alright, so now when we have gotten down to the end of our pie, you'll see that everything is nicely woven together. We're going to go ahead and we're going to pinch everything together on the edges, and we're just going to pull off or pinch off any excess dough. You can use a knife to cut it off, you could just pinch it off with your fingers. And then we're going to take that dough and we're going to tuck it in so that we can create a nice wall all the way around. And by tucking it in, that'll keep the dough from separating or baking open. It'll keep it all nicely sealed together. So just kind of tuck it in, tuck it under itself, and go all the way around and create a wall. Our final pie crust should be sitting on the pie tin. It should not be hanging over, otherwise it's just simply going to fall off. So that the pie edge there is to help you help the pie crust to stay on there. So now we're going to take our index and our thumb finger along with our other index finger, and we're just going to push together to crimp the edges. And this is just a decorative finish all the way around. Equal spacing, make sure everything is sitting on that edge, and there is our lattice pie. But we're not going to stop there. We're going to do one more simple little decoration, and you can use a cookie cutter if you have. I could not find mine, so I just used a paring knife. We're going to carefully roll out that dough again. A little bit of flour, that's it, to keep it from sticking. Roll it nice and thin. And I'm going to cut an apple shape from the center. And the reason why I'm cutting an apple is because it's apple pie, so I like to have that little decoration on top. So there's my apple base, and there is a leaf. And then I'm going to just take a little dough to make the stem. I'll make a second leaf. All right, the next thing I'm going to create an egg wash. So I take an egg, I will put in a sprinkle of salt. That starts to break down the proteins. And I'll also add in a little splash of water if I need to thin it out. Now using a pastry brush, I will now brush the egg wash, which will give me a nice color and shine on my final product. And then also it's going to give me like a glue to allow my apple to stick to the apple pie. brush that up, and then we can sprinkle it with a little bit of sugar for extra sweetness and caramelization and a little crunch as well. And there we go. We're going to go ahead and put this into an oven at 375 degrees for 45 minutes to an hour, looking for that crust to be nice and golden and the filling to be bubbling over. And here is our delicious apple pie. Enjoy!